Just a quick note before the show, a couple of apologies. One, the sound in the intro and outro got a little fucked up, but the sound in the main part of the episode is fine. So sorry for that. Sorry also not for not re-recording all of it, but it is very late, and this episode is very late because it was a busy and slightly unpredictable Christmas week. I hope you all had a lovely one. Christmas, Hanukkah. I think Hanukkah already finished or was finishing up. I did get a kind of a nice 1-2 revelation from my daughter that left me wondering whether I was a completely inadequate father or maybe the best father. We were on a walk with the whole family, and my older daughter and I were talking about Romeo and Juliet, and my younger daughter walked alongside us for a little while listening, and then leapt in to say, I want to read this so I get the wording exactly right. She leapt in to say, "Wait, Shakespeare was a real person? I thought he was a god." And, not great that she didn't know Shakespeare was a real person, but on the other hand, could be worse. I'm Matthew Buckley-Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. This week, I'm speaking with Niall Campbell, the author of The Island and the Sound, editor of Poetry London, and a member and teacher with the North Sea Poets. I had a great time talking to Niall. I've corresponded with him a little bit off mic, and I was really glad to get him to come talk a little bit on the show. So after I spoke with him, maybe a few days to a week later, he published this essay on the North Sea Poets Substack page called "What If It's Not Writer's Block?" And it's a great essay. I definitely recommend it. I'll put a link to all of this in the show notes. But it touches sort of the subject that we circle around for most of this episode. And don't just circle around, but really get at directly, which is not writing, or writing and failing, or running out of writing. We get into a few other things: writing across different forms and conventions, editing poetry magazines, judging poetry contests, Scottish cynicism, and what that means when it comes to success and failure, and the presence or absence of meritocracy. But I think the main theme of this conversation is failure as a writer. And the essay talks about that in, I think, a really frank and touching way. I didn't in the episode have Niall read any of his own poetry, but there's a poem in his most recent collection, The Island and the Sound. It's not about not writing, or in some way, I guess it is. It's about love letters. And it's about the way that love changes when you've been with someone for a long time. And it's not that it goes away. It's not that it diminishes, but it changes, and it's maybe a little bit harder to put your finger on. And in somewhat the same way that writing is particularly poetry, is just a different creature in middle age for some of us. Certainly for me, and I think for Niall. But I thought I would just read this. It's not a real long poem. It's called Love Letter. This is letter number 1. It's from a series called Love Letters from the 10th Year of Marriage. But this is just letter number 1. So this is addressed to his wife, talking about reading love poems from an earlier part of their relationship, and then thinking about them in comparison with the one he's writing now, and maybe with what things will be like in the future when they are, with luck, as he's imagining, still together. All right, this is letter number 1. Dear, the train's now sliding from Aberdour, still empty, just 3 others traveling through the June's pandemic. Sunlight on the North Sea. I've been thinking of those early letters we found at the back of the drawer. I had been in Nepal, and you had been working in the gallery in the park. the exhibitions of scientific drawings. We hadn't been together more than 6 months, but reading them, we seemed unwell with love, marking every word absolutely. It hurt me, can I say this, to read them. They read like the love of two other people. And yes, maybe it shamed me too, since it seemed a love I am incapable of. Drunk and in the blood. Which is why I want to write to you, shaming the next version of me. I do love you. Maybe not in a wildness, unless it is the wildness of stone and stream, wild in the closeness, a man, graying, but thinking of you, as the carriage shakes somewhere between Kinghorn and Kirkcaldy. I like that a lot. And I don't know, I mean, it's so distant that I can't imagine it was in Niall's mind, but I was reminded of the motion at the end of The River Merchant's Wife, a Letter, the Ezra Pound's semi-translation of Li Po, where it is a love letter from a wife to a husband, and there's this same sort of resorting to proper nouns at the end, resorting to place names in order to give a kind of to mark out the boundaries of love. Yeah, you know what? I wonder if this was in his mind, because it has a little bit. The paired butterflies are already yellow with August over the grass in the west garden. They hurt me, I grow older. Even that, they hurt me, I grow older. And then she ends, or Pound ends, if you are coming down through the narrows of the river Kiang, please let me know beforehand, and I will come out to meet you as far as Cho Fu Sa. And, I have no idea what the River Kiang is, or where Cho Fu Sa is, or where Kinghorn or Kirkcaldy are, but I'm convinced that they're real places. I'm convinced by these poems, and I'm convinced that they somehow mark out the truth of these poets' feelings. Yeah, I like that poem a lot. And I thought it would be a nice way to introduce as he calls it, a particularly Scottish conversation about be failing as a writer. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll have a note at the end about, we had a great conversation that's going to be on The Secret Show. I'll get to at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, the overall kind of in terms of actual our own poetry, I think it's difficult. I mean, there was a sense that somebody like Michael Longley, was always writing that single Michael Longley poem.
Right.
He was always short and about, especially towards the end of his life, about nature. John Burnside was another one. John Burnside's poems, it would be very difficult to be given a John Burnside poem and say, tell me roughly which one of his collections it was written in. Now, I mean, for myself, I've just published well, not just, it was about a year and a bit ago, published my third book. And do you know when you just get a sense of whatever voice I might have had might have run its course for a while? No, I mean,
yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I feel like as I've gotten into middle age, I write. I don't, it's not like the poetry is not a roaring flame coming out of me so much as like it's a thing that comes up occasionally, and mostly it sort of feels like prose is often the medium in which the muddy, slow feelings and thoughts I'm having now are better suited.
I 100%. Like, I'm just pulling this up. So I had this. I'm trying to write a Substack for next Friday, and there's that old. Is it Frost quote? No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, no surprise for the writer, no
From
surprise for the reader,
the
which is
Three
often
Poem
used.
Days,
Often used as right. This is how you write a poem. But what happens if it's actually guidance of when to stop writing poems? When you lose that sense of buzz and you lose that sense of the thrill, which I'm sad to say I kind of have, of my own voice. I'm more than delighted to look at anybody else's, but my own, especially, I just find, I don't know. What happens? And I think that's it. I wanted to write about it for the Substack, if only because I think it's one of those things that's not maybe talked about as much. And it's this sense of, right, what do you do when you maybe hit And so you do have those type of poets who their whole life have like a seam in the mountain they're just mining into, and they're hitting sometimes silver, sometimes gold, sometimes
Yeah,
coal.
yeah.
But whatever, they're in that seam. And then, but if you're not that, if you're a writer that is looking for something else, something dynamic, uh, to stir inside yourself, and it's not coming anymore. What do you do about that? I mean, we talked about shifting genre. I mean, that's similarly, I feel along that route, I've been trying to write little memoir essays and a little bit more prose fiction, but just trying to find something else that scratches that creative itch if the poems just
Yeah,
aren't doing
yeah.
it. What happens if you tire so completely of yourself? It's
No,
yeah, it's a tricky
and
one.
I mean, I think here, and again, it's partly just because of the long established institutionalization of poetry here. There's there's such a problem of tenured or tenure track poets
Mhm.
just putting out a book every 2.5 years, just because that's the thing you do, and you
Yeah.
think like more of them need to have had this recognition that like it's okay, like go ahead and slow down, go like there, I think of so many of the poets I most admired, Bishop, Larkin, Hausman, Justice, like poets who put out 4 or 5 books maybe
Yeah.
in a life, and that's a lot. That's a lot of books,
Mm.
And I think that it is probably the real exception that you have a Yeats or a Frost or where you have a truly like, I mean, Yeats wrote plays as well, but like you have a poet who is really a lyric poet, really
Mhm.
in a fiery way, producing at a high level, at a high rate of output throughout his life. I mean, that's so much the exception that it feels like there's maybe naturally like a kind of like with a star, you have a sort of an explosion early,
Mhm.
and if you're lucky, an explosion late,
Yep.
and it may be a little milder in the middle, and that's okay. I think.
I think it's just, I think the strange pressures we have as poets have impacted this side of it. Be it social media, be it, as you say, tenured professions, or moving into academia, where there's in the UK we've got this thing called REF, so Research Excellence Framework, where you have to produce something every few years because that goes towards departmental scoring. So
Right, right.
again, there's a lot of
Yeah, no, I mean,
internal
yeah, and it's
pressure.
similar in the U.S. though. You just think like for art, that's deadly.
It's terrifying, and so I've always been wary. I mean, a mentor of mine who passed away, but wonderful poet, Roddy Lumsden. He published so
Wait,
many.
Roddy Lumsden passed away.
Roddy Lumsden, yeah, he passed
Oh,
away. Oh, about how many years ago was it now? About 5 or 6 years ago.
he was
Um,
my very first book review was of the first book of his that came out in the U.S. and it was very humbling for me because I was like 19 and he
wow.
wrote an email like so he was like kind of in a funny way like all right asshole. Like, I mean I praised it but I gave him a little bit of grief as well and it was
Yeah.
like it was I was like oh
Where
shit
was
poets
it?
are real people. But he was
Tell
I
me,
mean
where was
I really enjoyed I didn't know he died.
what year was this?
Oh, the 2003 maybe.
Wow, okay. No, again, talk about people who did a lot for poets coming through, in terms of creating groups, creating a culture. There was a time, 2016, 2017, where the Elliots are kind of the big prize, where most people were up on stage saying, thank you to Roddy Lumsden for support,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he just did a lot. But I forgot, why was I talking about Roddy? Oh, Roddy, love him, but he published too much,
Yeah,
too
yeah,
many
yeah, yeah.
collections. There was sometimes, I think there was a run where he had 4 books in 4 years, and you just think a lot of it obviously was getting things out for him,
Right. Yeah, yeah,
exercising goals.
yeah, yeah.
And that's fine. But, that whole thing of it might want to be written, but I don't know if it wants to be published.
Right.
So yeah, so my own take on writing is, maybe I just need a wee pause, a bit of a break and something different, because uh, I think it'll be healthier in the long run, hopefully creatively.
Yeah, I think so. There's also it's like cross training. Like there are other you're not going to be weaker as
Yeah,
a
it's got to be
poet
next day
for,
sometime.
yeah, for writing
Is that
some
it? Is that
criticism,
it?
writing, yeah, just you'd have other, I really enjoy doing, like, throwing myself into, it's one of the reasons I kind of enjoy form and convention so much, is that it's fun to get to follow a different set of rules when you switch over to a different
Hmm.
genre, a different medium, It's like I love plot. I mean, I love meter and rhyme and poetry, but I really love plot in fiction and drama, because it's like it's a whole different set of these lines can be as long as I want them to be, but also I need to be building a story. I need there to be causality, that's that's so much of the fun of it. So yeah, I mean, I think slowing down in poetry is not bad news. That's like an opportunity to for all sorts of other writing, right?
Yeah, do you know, it was funny you mentioning like getting a handle on arc and things. So I did I got a paid PhD whenever it was 2019, 2018, something along those lines. And we were laughing with friends about in the 80s, 90s, if you were in a rock band or whatever band you were in, you went on job seekers allowance. That was essentially like creative funding for artists. But now that sort of job seekers allowance equivalent is the paid PhD. It's just some
Okay.
time just to go and do whatever
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
writing.
yeah.
But I did one on opera writing for libretto, and I was bringing along ideas to my supervisor at the time, and I was saying, right, I think there's a character. She might be an angel, and she starts singing, and birds are hitting the window. Okay, and then maybe the lights in the auditorium can go off or on or something along those lines. And my supervisor, very patient, lovely man, was just explaining, Niall, these are images. Okay, these are very different from actual arc, plot, story.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was an unusual thing to, no, it wasn't unusual. It was a slow process of just learning these conventions, but excitement in it as well, as you're saying. And what are you looking for? You're just looking for something that just raises the blood pressure a little bit, as a writer,
Yeah.
aren't you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You want to have to stretch. I mean, that was part of what was exciting to me when I really started writing fiction again, maybe 10 years ago, was, it's like being in a long plane ride and stretching your legs. It feels like, oh, I'm allowed to use all of these different things. I'm allowed to play with all of these elements that uh, I've been keeping, cooped up in order to focus on the tiny little bit of expression that's possible in poetry. And now I'm suddenly able to go anywhere and stretch and bring in, bring in other worlds and go, and take these long in a novel especially you have so much room to play. It's
Do you
yeah,
think you're more forgiving of yourself as well? Because here's
yeah,
here's what I think of it as well. Like, so if I spent I don't know, a week or two writing two or three chapters on something, and then I just realize it's a dead end,
yeah,
I don't see it as wasted in any way. Actually, I've enjoyed the process. I think I've learned something about, right, why is it going to a dead end? It's still that active discovery and the creative discovery. If I had spent 2 weeks not writing a poem, there would be such a pit of self-loathing. Can you imagine? You spent 2 weeks and you've been working away most days and you've not written a poem. My God, I wouldn't have been able
yeah,
to handle myself. So it's just that sense of forgiveness to say, right, okay, you're still handling things. It's just discovery and it's just and it leans into this idea of it being enjoyment again, or being something that's more than expectation. As a poet, you expect to write a poem, especially you get to some stage, you think, right, I know I can do this. So it's just a case of pulling the mechanisms to make it happen.
yeah, yeah.
But if you're trying a different genre, you're going, right, I'm going to try this, total failure. But there's
Right,
still some enjoyment of taking the wrong path. I think there's something about that, going into a different genre and discovering all these paths and just having to backtrack, going, no, that was completely wrong.
right. And
But I'm
not
quite happy with
knowing what you're not allowed to do. I have become
it.
so, like, since encountering it, I read it, talking to Ashley and McHugh probably a couple of years ago at this point, that little observation that Auden makes in a little speech in the Dyer's Hand when he says that if he knows too if he can recognize too immediately that a poem is working, then
Mm,
it's because it's a thing he already knows how to do, and it's already
yeah.
dead. It's already done.
Mhm.
That he can sense too early that like the repetition of the same move he's done before, and I become so aware of that danger
Mm,
that yeah, it's part of what's really fun about working in a genre that you are less expert in, that you don't know how to you don't know all the ways you can fuck up yet. I'll also say like it's one of the gifts of being like if one of the dangers of like being an institutional poet or being a very successful poet is that you publish too much. Like one of the gifts of being a less successful poet is that you're used to not publishing things, and so
mhm.
it doesn't feel like a waste when you write 200 pages of fiction and you think like, all right, well, useful to get that learned. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I wrote it. So I have written a novel and I pitched it around. Not much, some interest, not much interest. But I was showing another novelist. I was like, right, I'm going to get some southern opinion because let's be modest. When I was starting out in poetry, I looked for people who could guide me a little bit. Let's do the same with fiction. And they were going, why have you taken this sort of omnipotent authorial position? That is really quite weird to do. And you think, right, oh, okay. I think I'd been reading Saramago, the Jose Saramago, and this idea of, right, I would quite like to be this like a storyteller
Yeah.
type of novel, and just to assume that position of being able to say, right, this will pay off in the end, and you have little in jokes with the reader. But I was told quite bluntly that's just absolutely not working, and that's fine. But it was this sense of I had always wanted to test endurance with writing. Because the thing with the fiction is obviously to commit to that idea. Can
Yeah,
you
yeah,
commit
yeah.
to something for 60, 70, 80,000 words? And that itself is a buzz to think, right, okay, it was a complete washout, but how good that I managed to do it to the end.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. And it's a different creative experience to I remember that was what was exciting for me when I started reading Brian's novels. He wrote three novels that were unpublished before he finally published his first, and I read all of them. They were quite good. But I remember part of what was really exciting to me because I was writing a lot of plays at the time, and like in terms of just pure plotting, a straight stage play is kind of that's like the unbending arrow of plot. It's just
Hmm.
start to finish. It's like a shotgun check. I don't know if you have a shotgun checks. Like the idea is you could fire a shotgun through the front door and it would come out the back door.
Oh,
It's
right.
that
Okay.
like straight and short. And it feels like a straight play is like that, like and part of what was really exciting reading his novels was that you have some plot like that because he was trained by Alice McDermott, and she's huge on causality that's the big
Mm,
question. But because it's so long, you can't sustain that single course where there's always a sort of a bend.
mm,
And so what ends up happening is you can't see, it's not even that you can't see the end from the beginning, you can't see which question the end will even be addressing
yeah,
from the
yeah, yeah,
beginning
yeah, yeah.
because things will have changed so much along the middle. There's this curve that requires like it requires basically like it's something you can't scheme out from the beginning. You have to get into it and have been
Mm,
committed to it for long enough to begin to be able to really see how it develops. It's I remember the story my dad always told about painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling was that because Michelangelo it was a fresco, he had to paint it, it was dried right immediately. He had to build the scaffolding so high up that he could lie on his back to paint it.
uh-huh.
So he filled up basically half the chapel with scaffolding so he could paint half the ceiling and then took all of it down, and that was the first time he saw it.
Wow.
And it was having done that, committed, can't change it, that then he had to plan the second half. And it feels like that's with a novel. I mean, obviously you have the advantage of being able to change things, but you have to sort of you have to really commit in order then to, like, it's one thing to say, you're writing into the dark as a poem and you don't, who knows where these next 14 lines will go. But it's another thing when it's, who knows, I have the first 200 pages, where are the next 200 pages going? It's just a different kind of creative organ you're are exercising.
What's your situation with it? Have you finished the novel you're working on,
Oh, I
or?
finished. This is now my third soon to be unpublished novel. I'm currently querying with agents. So
That it's got to be, yeah, second, third, fourth.
yeah,
For
we'll
me, I'm
see.
talking about myself. It is exactly that. But again, you're forgiving and understanding. Is this a particularly Scottish conversation? We've gravitated towards failure rather than the success.
Yeah, I am curious. What is there's only uh, very crude outlines here, but like, what would you? I'm curious, like, because you made like a kind of a joking comment in an early email about typical Oxbridge nonsense. But I'm curious both like what the how you would characterize like your outlook on the English or UK culture at large, as well as like what is the Scottish character as is understood over there? Like, what does that mean to say this is a particularly Scottish style or flavor?
I mean, I suppose I'm Scottish Island as well. Now, Scottish Island, I think, was probably even maybe even more its own thing, but we would be especially self-deprecating,
Okay, all right,
and you wouldn't. Okay, an example. My uncle ran a business on the islands, and it was about selling the shellfish that the fishermen caught to Spain. So there's nobody in the UK buys. We have velvet crab, a particular type of crab
okay,
that you can catch on the US. Nobody in the UK buys it, so the Spanish buy it, and so lorries are organized every week to come from Spain to US for the market and then back. So for this and for the other things, he was given an OBE from the palace. So how did everybody react on the islands? They started calling him Old Boiled Egg, OBE. You know, and this is
remind me, what
somebody who's
is
done a lot
OBE
for
is
the
an honor from the,
so
but yeah, what does
officer
it
of the
stand for
British
again?
Empire,
Order of
officer of the
British
British.
Empire. Okay.
So
Oh,
they
so
started calling.
not a very, yeah.
So
Not, yeah.
if you get something good and you are proud of it, they will find a way to really take it down. So whatever you do, if something good happens to you, you have to make sure, oh, it's nothing, absolutely nothing. Oh, it's just these things happen. And that can happen in the on the negative side of things as well. Like I remember, so it was a story my mum was telling when she's from the island of Eriskay, my dad is from the island of South Uist, and when my older brother was born, so the first of us, uh, she was speaking to her mother-in-law, saying she's got a newborn baby, her first one. Um, when is it okay to take the child out? Because it's really windy on Uist. It's windy and it's
Yeah,
rainy and
yeah.
it's quite cold. And the answer from her mother-in-law was, "It's okay. He's baptized anyway. If he die, if he dies, he dies." It's essentially that was the answer. So, it's a curious culture. So,
Yeah.
it's anything good happens, it's not so much. Anything bad happens, it's not so much. Which has its benefits. We're quite used to. We can deal with catastrophe and relative success. So, but yeah, I'm I think there's an element of how we perceive perhaps south of England or America, especially as the cultures maybe around London become to mimic it a little bit more. This sense of because it's more competitive, there's more people, there's more competition, you do need to talk yourself up a lot more.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
what does that do? You start making statements, you start, you know, uh, demanding things in a way that perhaps is countercultural to how people from the other parts of the country would see it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I see. So yeah, yeah, it's funny. There's a little bit of a I think maybe here we would think of some of that as like a Midwestern quality, that they tend to be uh a little more community focused and very down on self promotion. I'm also just
Hmm.
thinking of like the, how geography is destiny, and there's a part of me that wants to like translate translate like cold, wet Scottish tall poppy syndrome to like
Yeah.
hot, dry Australian tall poppy syndrome. there's
Mm.
there's like a distant evolutionary link. Like the beak of the finch changes as you go
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like farther from the center of British power and B like into a different
Hmm.
climate. Yeah,
Yeah. No. But yeah, I think that's how we tend to react. I think there's always a good history of Scottish poetry editors who can look on things maybe with a bit of a cold eye. You know, Don was at Picador for a while, Robin Robertson at Cape, but I'm sure there's other examples as well who are just quite good at taking away the fluff of things and just looking at things as they are.
so me, yeah, all right. So I'm getting a little better sense of the maybe the character of the North Sea poets, that this is also part of the kind of the anti-professionalization attitude, that there's that you're responding to maybe like a way in which poetry gets treated in an instrumental way in South England or in the US, or in that you sort of like you're trying to remove the question about quality and skill and craft from any ulterior motives as much as possible.
I think so. I think that's the idea is, this idea, this perception of, what was there a sense of like anything but the poem? You
Right.
just want to tone it down to, just to be able to talk about the great poems again. I mean, I was going to go down a different anecdote there, but I'm going to skip that for politics sake. But
Sure.
I think there's yeah, I think it would be good at this moment to just be able to foster. When you look at poetry readers, for example, I mean, I was looking at Nielsen figures, so poetry book sales in the UK recently, and I think the broad brush strokes that we tend to be sold are poetry book sales are doing well. But these are kind of driven by a few like self-help poetry book, Instagram poetry books.
Sure. Yeah.
But the kind of the standard large press poetry books are not selling very well at all.
Yeah.
There was somebody who'd won the Forward Prize. This was about 2 or 3 years ago, so the second largest of the UK prizes. And I think by Christmas their sales were 308 copies. So there's
Yeah.
become like a real disconnect between what we laud, what we celebrate, but also what is connecting with people. And I think that there needs to, at some point, to be addressed this sense that, the whole Emperor's New Clothes idea, and to say, right, at some point, we need to address that we are losing people rather than, and whatever puff and whatever celebrations and whatever else we want to say about what we're doing or positions we might be adopting in higher institutions, we are, we're kind of losing this battle to an extent. And I just think if there's a way to bring it back to just the poem, then I think that's probably the only remedy that we got.
Is this at all related? Because I was a little bit curious when I saw it. It's not a. It's a sentiment that is. It was a little bit surprising, I think, because I. It just has a different implications tonally in the U.S. There's a note on the North Sea Poets website that says, let me see if I can find it. We do not and will never receive money from public funding bodies. And yeah, I feel like the equivalent as a kind of a statement that would be made publicly about an arts organization here would be something like, we will never accept funding from corporations or something like this. But I'm curious, like what are the implications there of public funding bodies?
I think the complication is you can speak to anyone. I was speaking to a festival north of Scotland, but I deal with Arts Council England, then there's Creative Scotland, there's Scottish Arts Council, but all are pretty much the same. If you were to ask me, and as much as I support what the Arts Council have been doing in terms of Poetry London, if you were to ask me who, on my bad days, I should say, who's the first obligation of the magazine? You would ideally want to say the reader,
Yeah.
but that's not it. You would maybe second say it's the poets, but that's not it either. The first obligation for a lot of these magazines would be the Arts Council and fulfilling the obligations that they said. But the Arts Council bend the rules because they, rather than being an element or a kind of a body that would facilitate artistic excellence, they seem to see their role as a body that facilitates social good.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so they would push you into doing things that's almost, they were more likely to fund you rather than saying you're going to do poetry. If you were to say, we're going to do a poetry magazine, but our interest is in these sorts of outreach schemes.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's anything but the art, anything but the poetry. So I think the idea behind, I think, that statement was this sense of our obligation is to who? It is
Right,
to the
right,
people
right.
attending our classes or to this maybe hopefully larger sense of poetry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I think it has become a little bit entangled.
Yeah, it's funny because it's true over here, but I think the reason that people wouldn't make the same kind of statement here is that very few very few arts organizations over here don't also already have that baked in as their own agenda,
Yep.
just as part of I mean, it's almost enforced as a norm.
Mhm.
Setting funding aside, it almost is just understood that that's because part of what you're saying when you make a statement like that is you can trust what we say and produce to be to be authentic to these other concerns. Like when we say something or when we endorse something or when we get excited about something, you can read it in this way and not in this other way. Is part of what
Yeah.
you're saying. Yeah, because I was curious that it was in that same interview that Patterson did with LM. He said because he I mean he talks about some of the same concerns you're talking about, but he talks about this shift. He says, if you fail to reward merit for one generation, you embed mediocrity in the next. The mediocre will then get the teaching gig, judge the prize, run the institution, and call the shots. And the feeling I had reading this interview was that I recognized a lot of what he was talking about, but what seemed maybe strange to me was that it seemed in his account to have been a recent change. Whereas I would say here, like, we're doing all of these same things here where we're the arts organizations seem to be concerned with making the world a better place, which is a wonderful thing to do, but like it's not doesn't have anything to do with art necessarily,
Mhm.
but that's not a one generation problem to me. I mean, at least that seems to me like a you go back another generation and they might not be focusing might not have been focusing on exactly the same problem, but they were still not focusing on art a generation ago, and generation before that, and a generation before that they
Yeah.
were focusing on who's friend or who's this or that. That the real concern for art and merit has been out of the question from the get-go, and at least in my account. So I'm curious, does it feel like there has been, in a way, like I'm touched sometimes when I hear UK poets talk about the arts over there, because it does seem like there's a fresher sense that some of this stuff, in some of these cases, the stakes were real.
So Dawn, I mean, you
And
might
yeah,
not
you're
read,
not on the hook for anything he says, obviously, but yeah.
but my perception on it is okay. There's going to be a bit of rose tinted glasses there to think right. When was the better kind of golden
Sure.
era where it was different? But I think if you're, I think the point lingers that if you want to do anything, if you see that there's a problem now in a poetic culture, you've got to ask yourself, how do you better it? And I think the only way you do it is to go back to Roddy Lumsden. I mean, this is somebody who, again, anecdotally, I met him on this undergrad, and he's there's a large award called an Eric Gregory Award for poets under 30. So it's pre-collection, anything like that. It's just to show that you've got some potential, really. And he was up at St Andrews giving a talk because there'd been no Scottish winner for something like 17 years. And it was just like, where have the Scottish poets gone? But I met him at this thing, and he said, "Oh, I've been told you're writing some poems. Send me some." And so, and I was, taken aback. One that a kind of more established poet would have any interest. So
Yeah.
I sent him some poems, thinking I would, you know, probably get nothing back at all.
Right.
And he responded within about 4 days. And it was this sense of somebody really having an interest and engagement of the poets coming through and help to serve as in a time when it's difficult to have any sort of guide as to what you might be doing for advice, like how do you submit to a magazine, how do you submit to a poetry press or an editor, like what's all this side of things going on, to have somebody that you can rely on for advice. So I think this is probably more aside and away from North Sea poets. North Sea poets I think can hopefully do something that's better in terms of talking about the quality of a poem. But for me, what do I have an interest in is to try and create some sort of um, poetic culture that kind of values the things I value in a poem.
Yeah.
Richness, musicality, some sort of rhythmic element, and to be able to not make everybody sound like me in the way that Roddy didn't make me sound like him,
Yeah.
but to try and foster that or encourage it.
Yeah, I mean, you can only really concern yourself with how you're with the part of the culture that you're involved with directly. Do you feel like you have a the magazine is never going to be, as you said, it's never going to be just the sound of Mr. Campbell, but is there an ethos or a style or a vision to Poetry London as you're putting it out? Is there something you're cultivating in the poems you're publishing there?
I think especially when I was starting out, I saw that there was a bit of a disconnect in UK magazines between the older, more established ones. We've got just such an obsession with the debut, and I think it's
Yeah,
an
yeah, yeah.
unhealthy, such an unhealthy obsession with the debut, to the point that you're going to have even so all these debut writers all muscling for position, and let's say you are the one that gets picked up and lauded. What happens with your second book? Almost
Right.
nothing. And it's an act of cruelty as much as anything else, rather than this sense of poetry being a journey, like we were talking about earlier, that you're going to have potentially your mid-career dip, your mid-career absolute desert,
Yeah.
or you're going to write right through whatever happens. So what did I want with Poetry London was, especially at the start, this sense of being able to say, right, I'm going to get somebody like Jean Sprackland, an older poet in they're publishing poems with us. Paul Farley, terrific poet, maybe more neglected in the mainstream, not mainstream, but in kind of the larger UK magazines recently, and to be able to go out and to hunt for good poems and find a wee bit more of an even balance between, right, okay, young, exciting, new work, but also the sense of, hey, nobody's getting worse, really, or well, actually, no, that's a terrible statement.
Say-
Let's be honest, that's a lie. Oh, some people are getting worse. Okay,
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people who are getting worse, but there's still a lot of value in these poets who have just committed. We were in that section for the Substack about the writing career.
Yeah.
Having Sean O'Brien read with these Eric Gregory winners from this year, they're starting out, being published for maybe a year or two, and he's been published for, I can't remember, it's 47 or 49 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's something incredible about that. To have no doubt his dips and his issues. And I was reading he had tried to do Dante, and I saw a pretty bad review of it in a 2002 Guardian article. Uh, and so to have like the moments where you're being slammed, the moments where you're winning prizes, the moments where you're writing a lot, moments where you're writing nothing. Why would you exclude that?
Right.
Because of trends. So with
God,
poetry,
imagine how
London,
much you would learn from doing a bad translation of Dante. Like how
do you
much
know
would you
what?
grow like
I
that's
was
like what a
looking.
great experience to have had.
I was looking at I didn't realize how many poets have done their version of Dante. So you got Sean O'Brien with an interesting one. There's an Irish poet called Kieran Carson who did one as well. Obviously, was it Clive James who did one as well.
I
And so
didn't know
you're
that.
looking at them going, right, how do they tackle, even if you just take the first, like the first 5 pages, and
Right.
just to be able to compare them, who pressed on what. But you do, you learn so much just by looking at,
Yeah.
especially with so many of them all close together. Not that I was trying to do a Dante. I was not going to do my Dante.
I feel like unless I'm mistaken, Haney did he only ever did selections, which feels like
Yeah.
not a bad way to go. Like pick a few passages where you feel like you've got something to do with it, and then that's all right. That's
Oh,
enough.
beautifully. I think it was I don't know if I'm mispronouncing it, but Ugolino.
His Ugolino is
Ugolino.
wonderful, and he did
Oh,
he did like
wonderful.
a weird but really beautiful like adaptation that's not quite that sort of it veers off from the Dante, but a version of the Forest of Suicides. It's wonderful. Where he I think it's like it's part of it is translation and part of it is his own thing.
Oh, let me tell
I can't
you.
remember what collection it's in, but it's because I think I think Sylvia Plath is in it. It's like a
That's
strange, really
Dawn.
beautiful thing. Yeah,
That's Dawn, though, is it not?
is that Don?
Yeah, that's in Dawn. That's in
Oh,
Landing Light.
I'm
What is
miscrediting.
that?
All right,
The Forest of the
stealing
Suicide. Yeah.
Scottish Valor for the.
I think
Yeah,
Dawn would take that, being
okay.
mistaken for him. Yeah, I think we all would take that.
Yeah, no, oh yeah, well, whatever it was, I remember reading it to my wife a few years ago, just finding it really good.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
dad's a big
I'm a
fan.
great believer in like excerpts and imitations. That's the
Mm.
scope of my translation ambition. So I'm curious because over here it is and even the friends of mine who've had some experience with it, the I think every big book prize here is like very thoroughly a process of committee. Like
Mhm.
it is a committee within committee within committee here. So you're involved in or you are judging the T.S. Eliot Prize.
Yeah, judging. So there's three of us. There's
Oh, the three
myself.
of you. Okay, so it's not all on you. Yeah.
No, so there's Michael Hoffman is the chair, myself, and another British poet, Patience Agbabi.
Okay.
So yeah, we've done our shortlist, and now it's holding off till January, and
How
we'll see how it
how
goes.
has that been? What is that? Yeah, what's that experience like? I mean, what does that mean? You read how many books are in the running?
I think it was about 200,
Phew.
200 collections. Yeah, I mean it was fascinating. So I judged also the Forward Prize in 2017, maybe something
Oof,
along, maybe
yeah, okay.
2018. So it's been interesting to balance them off.
And is that a single poem or is that a whole collection?
That's the similar. It's single collection, best first collection, and best single poem when
Oh,
I was
okay. Oh,
judging it.
wow. All
So
right.
they've got a little bit more categories. Um, but whereas the Elliot's, there's 10 shortlisted books. For the forwards, there's five main collection, five debut, five single poem. Now they've done five spoken or performed poems as well. But it's
Wow.
difficult because for the forwards, you've got five judges with five
Okay.
places.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
a little bit trickier. With the Elliot's, there's just more room for, what would you say, just different appreciations of what poems are trying to do.
Okay.
But I yeah, it's I'm trying to think because obviously how much can I say or how much can I
Right.
not
I
say?
don't know.
It's
Yeah,
always
sure.
it's always a balance with these sorts of things. But I think it's been fascinating. I think there's a sense of there being quite a lot of quality and quite a lot of intermittent quality, but like this idea of sustained or what's a book trying to do and sustained quality was a little bit um what we're looking for. But I do think it's probably too soon to be talking about it because my only problem is I'll want to be open and I'm already
Right. Of
feeling
course.
my
Of
tongue
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
wanting to be open,
Sure, sure,
but
sure.
I need to I probably best
Well,
back at it.
as to speak in very broad terms, just because what one thing you gain from reading for a prize like that is at least some decent sense of what the current poetry landscape actually is. Like you have, if nothing else, read 200
Mm.
books that came out the same year or two. So you have maybe better than most people. I mean, you also read for a magazine and you teach, but you have maybe more better than most people a sense of what is going on in UK poetry at the moment. So, or is it
Yeah,
just UK or is it also abroad?
no, but there's some Americans. I mean,
Okay,
as long as you've got a UK publisher, but there's always quite a lot of North American poets
okay.
included. But I mean, generally, maybe more from the magazine than from the prize because you're getting a snapshot, which maybe is not so good at showing movement
Sure.
as anything else. But I think generally my impression is the single focus collection or thematic collection is probably going out of fashion, maybe and not before too soon.
Thank
I
God.
think, yeah, I think we can all hope. I mean, the difficulty is, I think, with again to go back to this point of the disconnect with readers, I think readers are done with it, are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely done with it. Who are not done with it? Probably publishers because it's the
Yeah,
easiest sell. You know, I
yeah,
had a friend of mine who was with a larger press, one of the kind of larger ones in the UK, who, when the book was coming out, it was to do with a specific topic, men's mental health, right? We
yeah.
want you to write for The Guardian or these newspapers on specific men's mental health. That's going to be your pitch. I had another friend whose book was on motherhood and this other, maybe more kind of sexual politics type situation. And they showed the first draft to the editor, and the editor was like, Motherhood's been done. Can we focus on this other thing that's maybe a little bit more,
Yeah.
you know, it
I like
basically
that
what
motherhood's
they're
been
they're
done.
not using the word marketable, but what they mean is marketable, you
I just
know?
like the idea that motherhood is an exhausted topic. Like,
Ah,
that's about there's really not much more to say about motherhood.
it's just frustrating. I think, but this is it. The pressures of the publishing houses to have something that they can say, this is exactly what this is this
Yeah,
little
yeah,
niche which will fill articles and fill review spaces but won't reach readers. And so what's an editor of a publishing house? Again, we talk about obligations. Who's their fundamental obligation to? They seem to have a misguided idea that the obligation is to what can be sold or what can be pitched to the like journalistic side of things, when it's really just, well, would these poems connect with somebody or not when they're sitting reading in their armchair beside a window and it's raining outside? You know? Well,
yeah,
so I
yeah,
don't know. I think, but yeah, to go back to it, I think there's a sense that the thing single themed collection is on the way out. How long do these things take to kind of feed through because of kind of the way you kind of pick up for publication? Probably 2 or 3 years still, we're going to have a lot of that. But I do think it's going to move. But I also just wonder, kind of talking about cultural taste, we had that era of anthologies, 60s, 70s, where
yeah,
everything was you're introduced to a poet by the anthologies, whoever you got to be their editor, and that went out the window, and that stopped. And then it was the era of prizes, and people were known because he had won a prize or were shortlisted for prizes. But again, if you look at sales, that connection is stopping. So what happens next? Like, where does it go after? Like, are we all just ships going out solo into the wild? And this is like social media and Instagram now.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
no
yeah.
means by which you can have another vehicle that would introduce you to readers. It's just you've got to go solo. Is
I
that where
think,
we are?
yeah, I mean, I think increasingly it's just a viral poem, It's like
Yeah.
the one-off poem that goes around, and then that sort of that you hang your hat on that, I fear.
It's like with Substack.
Yeah,
I'm very, very late to Substack in
yeah,
that
yeah,
in terms of reading Substack. And I think it was about a year ago I was on it and it seemed quite a placid place. There was some mainly just articles, articles, articles.
yeah, yeah.
And now it's become like the Wild West. It's like there's like gold panning time, and
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, yeah.
okay, there's something to be here, and everybody's just rushed in. And it's really hard. It's just hard for the people who must have been there cultivating and building something for a long time, who are obviously feeling a bit frustrated. And then you've got a lot of people just coming in and trying to get attention. And I saw videos on it, and I just thought, this is of all the places where I thought it'd be free from videos.
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean,
this,
because the social media aspect of it, the notes part, which is basically that's
mm,
just their version of Twitter,
ah,
is really big now, and it's maddening that like,
I hate it.
yeah, half of what I see is like, didn't we come here to get away from this? Isn't this
Yes,
the thing that
exactly. I had to stop
yeah,
Twitter. I was, I thought I was one of the lingerers who was like, nope, this is people are going to come back, and it's a nice way. I've met some nice friends here. Not that I posted or did anything
right,
at
yeah,
all,
yeah,
But then to see it, the like Twitterification of Substack in real time, you just think, no, you're taking over so many of the worst qualities.
There's something I do really like about the North Sea Poets, and I'll put links to everything in the show notes. But this is you do classes and you do various other things, but you also have this Substack feed. And part of what I really like about it that is sort of what feels like it can get a little bit exhausting about Substack sometimes is that it's like what, seven of you who do
Mm,
this, and so you will get some pieces that are a little round robin where each of you pitches in a little bit, and then some that are kind of overviews of some recent events, and then some that are individual essays. I read the one from a while back that you I think you sent me, somebody sent me the Patterson's piece on the long game, and they're just these great little essays on a variety of topics, but it doesn't feel like one person who's having to squeeze blood from the stone every week. It's like you can rotate a little.
seven of us squeezing
Right.
blood from
It's
this
I mean
one.
it's
That's
it's what it's what one used to like in a magazine, right?
yeah.
Which was you could sort of hear from a rotating variety of people, but you weren't having to pump something out like a column every week.
Yeah, I think that was always the kind of intention. And what we want to do is, I think, in the future, just bring in more guests because you want to just make sure you're saying something because you want to, or you feel like
Right.
you've got something to say, or you know, um, that yeah, there's just a reason, and again, to speak to creativity, a creative reason to be doing or saying anything, rather than obligation, obligation, obligation that you need content. We want to be firmly anti-content. It's not content. You know, it's you hope that there's a little bit of blood in a nice way pumping around the veins of it.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. So I mean, this has been terrific, and I'm very, very glad you made me watch this bizarre great movie. I also know that I've just corresponded with you a little bit off the public record for a while. I'm I know at least you and Steve Knepper and various other people have been in a very charming way said like part of the fun of the podcast has been getting to disagree with things in exciting
Mm.
ways. So I'm curious, are there any burning questions or objections that have been rolling around for you that you've wanted to chime in on?
There was a lot. There was a
Okay,
lot
all
in
right,
a
sure,
nice way,
sure.
genuinely in a nice way.
Good,
And
good, good. Yeah.
this is why I think I wanted to come back on a film because I was listening. I was on a train. I think I was listening to your Bob Dylan review, and I was getting furious. Going, that's not Bob Dylan. That's not Bob Dylan. I thought it was fascinating. I mean, I think that Bob Dylan movie. It was an interesting one, but it was more. I remember I've watched the Scorsese Bob Dylan documentary so many times, and I love it. But there's a moment where he wins, I think it's a Thomas Paine Award, like Freedom Medal or something along those lines.
Sure, yeah.
And he's in this crowd, and he's in this kind of fancy auditorium, and he's bemoaning the fact there's so many gray-haired people. Um, and I just think what is amazing with Bob Dylan is somebody who had it all in the palm of his hand, but there was always the obligation, Maggie's farm. You're going to do your bit. This is what
Yeah.
we expect from you in return. We just went, nah, I will do whatever I want. And so there's that
Yeah.
rebelliousness of Bob Dylan that I really particularly loved. Yeah, but it's so I've spared you so many emails of just going wittering on. I just thought how I write a couple of paragraphs and I just think no, leave poor Emmanuel. Let him get on with the thing he's doing. So, but it's in a good way, I just if you're engaged, I mean, this is again to go back to this idea of critique. You're never gonna get if you're truly engaged with a poem, as somebody who's critiquing it, you're always going to give criticism. I remember when I was the worst. I had a lot of bad feedback when I was
Yeah, yeah.
starting at poetry, but the worst feedback I ever received was actually when Kathleen Jamie was my tutor, and I brought along a poem, and she just went, "Yeah, it's fine, it's fine," and there was it risked nothing,
Yeah, yeah.
so it completely failed to get engagement with it. And I just think with all these things, like with your podcast, if you're engaged with it, you want to cut it open and say, no, this, no, what are you on about? So I mean, the saving grace is I would have to type all these things out. If I'm a WhatsApp notes user, you're a voice notes user,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
very lucky you're spared my voice notes. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, this is my dad does on his long walks through the woods with his dog. He will dictate notes into his phone, but then I just get this like half
Yeah.
legible stream of typoed consciousness from
Yeah,
him
yeah,
about
yeah.
all of his objections.
But
So
no,
yeah,
it's such a terrific thing. Thank you so much for having me on because it's been a
yeah,
pleasure as a long time listener and just so pleased to be able to kind of come and witter on a little bit. So if there's any more strange and bizarre movies, I will let you know, and maybe we
please,
can do
yeah,
a part
no.
two.
And I think you would really like Kiss of the Spider Woman. I mean,
I
again,
will
the
do
book
that.
is if you like. I want to anybody who reads it. I just feel like skip all the footnotes. But the movie is also just like a wonderful. I mean, the two of them are such amazing actors, and it's just such a strange.
Mm,
It captures the weird, but like very. It's a very like widespread phenomenon. Like I remember from even going to like boys' camp as a kid. One, I mean, this comes back to I think Ethan McGuire wrote a thing recently about returning to this question, like the poets that Plato was objecting to and talking about in the Republic, the equivalent of them today are not poets. They're movie makers. They're TV
mhm,
like people who are making big popular telling
mhm,
stories in a big popular medium, but this funny tradition of people summarizing stories to one another in conversation. I feel like there's so much of my childhood was like somebody. I realized like a lot of like the stories my dad told me as a kid were like
uh-huh.
his like Baudelarized summaries of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
horrifying R-rated movies he'd seen or friends summarizing things to me. But this the story and the movie does this really beautifully is like two guys in prison telling movies to each other.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And of course like what you realize through part of it is like some of them are regular movies, some of them are very weird.
Mm,
Yeah, some of them are not the movies they thought they were watching at the time.
no, I promise that's going to be that's maybe a Christmas movie,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
not family movie,
I
but
was gonna say not a family movie.
not a family
Yeah,
movie.
yeah, no. Good. Well, no, I mean, and you have to come back and tell us more. True, and we'll be looking for is the long the short list is out, and I'll be interested to see what the final results are on the
I
TSLA.
think that's 19th of January, something along
Okay.
those lines. So yeah, shortlist's out, 10 great books on the shortlist at the moment. But yeah, we'll see how that last judging meeting goes. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And the new issue of Poetry London's coming out soon.
We had one in early November, and the new one's going to be March.
Okay.
But we're also doing a pamphlet, so I'm trying to get ahead of the game with getting it to the typesetter pre-Christmas because I don't panic, but I get stressed. I get
Yeah.
stressed about it when you've got a launch date. Just my frequent nightmare close to launch is launching without a magazine to launch. So it's
Yeah.
got to be there, it's got to be in the office about 3 weeks before, preferably. So yeah, it's almost there. But please do. I mean, do look out for Poetry London. I think what we're doing is some really quite good stuff. So
Yeah, and you're for because I know we've got listeners from all over, but you're publishing these are not just London poets and they're not just UK poets. They are
oh no,
from
no. I
across the
mean,
English speaking world. Yeah.
there's a lot of really great American poets. I mean, obviously yourself, you were in our issue, and we were so delighted to have you. But Carl Phillips was in recently, and Victoria Chang's coming up as well. But just really from all over Australia, China, Japan, South America, North America, everywhere, really.
That was my conversation with Niall Campbell. I spoke with him. I did this conversation a little bit out of order, but I had another great conversation with him about writing workshops, what we like and dislike about taking them, being in them, what they're good for, what they're not good for. He runs writing workshops. I do as well, and we sort of in slightly different ways. We talk about how that works and what are the what are the virtues and vices of writing workshops. We also then, at his suggestion, talk about Robert Eggers' 2019 movie, The Lighthouse, which I had never seen before and which is a wild ride, as my wife would say. It's less of a cinemaphile kind of conversation than it is a conversation about how an artist should or could approach his work, what we look for when we return to an artist, be that a filmmaker or a poet. I think you will enjoy it. If you would like to hear, go to SLEERICKETS.substack.com. You can put your email address into the blank slot. You will not be signing up for anything except an email from me saying you have a week's access for free to The Secret Show. After that, it's pretty fucking cheap. It's a new episode every week in addition to the main feed. There's 100, I can't even count, 50, 60, 70 episodes up there now. You can go back through the backlog. And I should mention also that even if you just subscribe for free, you will get a notice every week when the episode has come out that comes with a free, 5-10 minute preview, a little excerpt that I thought was sort of juicy and fun from the episode that if you'd like, you can just listen to on its own. If you are inclined to support the show, please do sign up. It is extremely cheap. It is, I think, still below the minimum monthly recommendation that Substack makes. So please do sign up. SLEERICKETS.substack.com. If you are feeling particularly generous or rich, then sign up to be a motherfucker of the arts. You can pay a little more every month, and it makes a big difference. If you would really like to listen, but you have a genuinely hard time paying for it, then write to me at sleerickets@gmail.com, and I'll help you out. I'll hook you up. People do all of these things. It is normal and fine, and just let me know. Thank you for listening. Do go check out Niall Campbell's book, The Island and the Sound, as well as Poetry London and the North Sea Poets. And with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.